Picture the eerie, uncomfortable quiet of an NFL training camp that is missing its absolute main attraction. The summer sun is beating down on the practice fields in Westfield, Indiana. You can hear the pads popping. You can see the positional drills running at full, absolute blazing speed. The coaching staff is barking orders, but the single most expensive weapon on the entire roster, he is nowhere to be found. Today, in this explainer, we are decoding one of the most high-stakes, nerve-wracking, and frankly fascinating situations currently unfolding in the National Football League. We need to talk about Alec Pierce, we need to talk about an ankle that is currently holding an entire franchise hostage, and we need to look at what this training camp absence actually means for a team that is absolutely desperate to get back to the postseason. The clock is ticking, the pressure is mounting, and the silence is only getting louder. $114 million. I really want you to just sit with that number for a second. That is the staggering, gravity-shifting figure anchoring this entire saga. Back in March, the Indianapolis Colts pushed all of their chips to the middle of the table. They didn't just test the waters, they made a massive, undeniable statement by handing their star wide receiver Alec Pierce a 4-year, $114 million contract extension. Now, at that exact moment, before the ever-shifting wide receiver market inevitably reset itself with other deals across the league, this monumental agreement actually made Pierce the highest-paid wide receiver in the history of the NFL. Think about the expectations that come attached to that kind of money. The Colts front office didn't just pay him to be a complementary piece of the puzzle. They didn't pay him to be a decoy. They paid him to be the undeniable, irreplaceable cornerstone of their passing attack for the next half-decade. But here is the brutal, unforgiving reality of the business of football. When you sign a historic, market-setting contract, expectations don't just go up. They instantly go from high to astronomical. The margin for error vanishes, and every single day you aren't out there on the grass proving you're worth that paycheck, the scrutiny intensifies. Right now, Pierce is sitting on the physically unable to perform list, the PUP list. That is not where a $114 million man belongs in August. You have an entire NFL franchise holding its collective breath, staring down the barrel of a massive financial commitment with literally nothing to show for it on the practice field. The pressure mounting on the general manager who signed that 9-figure check and the coaching staff relying on his explosive playmaking ability is completely off the charts.
Now, you might be asking yourself, how does a guy secure that kind of historic payday? Well, you don't hand out that kind of money without absolute, undeniable proof of concept. Look at these elite, game-breaking numbers from his 2025 campaign. In 15 games, Alec Pierce put up unprecedented career highs across the board. 47 receptions, an incredible 1,003 receiving yards, 6 hard-fought touchdowns. I want you to do the math on that for a second, because the volume doesn't tell the whole story, the efficiency does. 1,000 yards on just 47 catches, that is over 21 yards per reception. That is completely absurd in the modern NFL. He wasn't just catching underneath passes or picking up cheap garbage-time yardage in late-game situations. He was moving the chains on critical have-to-have-it third downs. He was stretching the field vertically and completely terrorizing opposing secondaries week in and week out. When this team was rolling, when they were imposing their absolute will on opposing defenses early in the year, it was Alec Pierce leading the charge. He was forcing defensive coordinators to completely rip up their game plans and deploy double-team structures just to keep him in front of them. You look at that 1,000-plus yard threshold, right? That remains the gold standard for NFL receivers. That is exactly where you separate the good players from the truly elite, franchise-altering game changers. Achieving that milestone while constantly battling safety help over the top signifies a player who can single-handedly shoulder the load of an entire passing game. The Colts looked at this massive jump in production. They saw a 26-year-old receiver just entering his peak athletic prime, and they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, they could not afford to let him hit the open market. He had to be locked down.
But to truly understand the sheer gravity of his current absence, we have to trace this injury all the way back to its origin point. Because this wasn't a sudden, out-of-nowhere twist of fate that happened on a freak play this summer. No, this has been a slow, grinding, deeply physical battle. The initial ankle injury actually occurred all the way back in 2024. I want you to think about the physical toll and the immense mental fortitude it requires to do what he did next. For the entirety of that breakout 2025 season we just analyzed, the 1,000 yards, the explosive downfield plays, the highlight reel contested catches where he's going up over 2 defenders, Alec Pierce was playing through severe, lingering pain. He was strapping up his cleats, gritting his teeth, receiving exhaustive, around-the-clock treatment in the trainer's room, and carrying this offense on a joint that was far from 100%. It speaks volumes about his toughness. It shows his total commitment to that locker room. He put the team's success way ahead of his own physical comfort, but as we all know, the human body can only take so much punishment in this incredibly violent league. Eventually, a massive price has to be paid. You just can't simply tape up a structural issue forever and hope it goes away. Finally, in the 2026 offseason, the medical decision was made. He needed surgery to fix the issue once and for all. So that brings us to the present day. Training camp is fully underway, the 53-man roster is taking shape, and Pierce is sidelined on the PUP list. This chronological journey reveals a warrior who gave absolutely everything, sure, but it also highlights an injury that has lingered and haunted him for years, raising incredibly valid questions about his long-term durability just months after signing the contract of a lifetime.
Which brings us to the most nerve-wracking, stomach-dropping update of this entire saga. The latest development out of Indianapolis is that Pierce recently received another injection in that surgically repaired ankle. And crucially, critically, he remains sidelined. He still has not practiced yet. When you hear the word injection during the intense dog days of August training camp, alarm bells naturally start ringing. The local media goes on high alert, the fan base starts panicking, it introduces a massive heavy cloud of uncertainty over the entire team facility. You have to wonder, is this just a minor setback? Is the healing process stalling entirely? Is the ankle completely rejecting the intense physical therapy required for an NFL receiver to get back to full speed? When a guy signs a $114 million contract, fans expect to see him out there catching passes in 7-on-7 drills, dominating cornerbacks in one-on-one sessions, and building crucial timing with his quarterback. They do not expect to hear about him getting medical shots just to help the joint along. And the deafening silence regarding an exact, definitive timeline for his return, that only amplifies the tension. The Colts front office and medical staff have repeatedly stated they believe he will be ready for the start of the season. But as days turn into weeks without him stepping a single foot on the grass, the anxiety in Indianapolis is incredibly palpable. You can literally feel it in the tone of the daily press conferences. You can feel it radiating from the bleachers during open practices. The fear of a lost season for their premier weapon is starting to creep into the collective consciousness of the entire organization.
But okay, before we declare a total state of emergency in Indianapolis, let's take a deep breath, step back, and look at the broader strategic picture. ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter recently appeared on the Pat McAfee show and offered a crucial piece of perspective that completely shifts the narrative arc here. He explicitly stressed that there is absolutely no need to sound the alarm just yet. Listen to this insight from Schefter. Quote, "They're being smart and cautious. They're taking their time with him. He's just not there yet." End quote. Schefter just painted a picture of calculated, deliberate patience. Think about the pure, cold logic operating behind the scenes in that front office right now. The Colts literally made Alec Pierce the focal point of their entire offseason strategy. They led off free agency with the blockbuster news drop of his re-signing. You do not hand a player a 9-figure deal, making a historic financial commitment that impacts your salary cap for the next half-decade just to rush him back for a meaningless August practice and risk a catastrophic, career-altering re-injury. You just don't do it. You protect your premium assets at all costs. The Colts medical staff knows exactly what is at stake here. They aren't panicking behind closed doors. They are simply executing a highly conservative, strictly monitored rehabilitation plan. They are playing the long game, prioritizing his availability for high-stakes December and January football over padded practices in the middle of the summer heat.
And we are getting direct confirmation of this patient, calculated approach straight from the top of the command chain. Head coach Shane Steichen recently spoke with the Indy Star's Nathan Brown, and his assessment of the situation cuts right through all the outside noise, all the panic, and all the media speculation. When asked directly about the 53rd overall pick from the 2022 draft, Steichen didn't mince words. He didn't offer any vague, non-committal coach speak. He looked right at the reporter and stated that Pierce is, quote, doing a hell of a job on his road to recovery. Now, I want you to really think about that phrasing. That is not the language of a head coach who is secretly terrified about his star receiver's long-term health. That is the confident, aggressive language of a coach who sees a player attacking his rehab assignments with the exact same relentless intensity he uses to attack opposing cornerbacks on Sunday afternoons. Internal reports indicate that the rehabilitation is moving strictly in the right direction. In fact, there have even been circulating reports from inside the building suggesting Pierce could potentially be back on the field in a matter of 2 weeks, ramping up just in time for the regular season. The sheer contrast here between the external panic of the fan base and the internal calm of the coaching staff is fascinating to witness. Steichen's unwavering confidence serves as the ultimate anchor for a nervous, traumatized fan base that is desperately looking for reassurance that their top playmaker will be ready when the real games actually begin.
To truly grasp why everyone in Indianapolis is so hyper-focused on Pierce's ankle and why the anxiety remains so incredibly high despite the head coach's reassurance, we have to zoom out. We have to look at the deep, lingering scars left behind by the 2025 season, because the Colts experienced the collapse of stunning, historic proportions last year. Look at this disastrous tale of two halves. Through the first 10 games of the year, heading into their bye week, they were a dominant, unstoppable juggernaut. They sat at an imposing 8-2 record. They were the talk of the league. They were controlling their division, looking like legitimate, undeniable contenders in the crowded AFC. And then, the floor completely caved in beneath them. It was a free fall.
They finished the season on a disastrous 0-7 skid. They plummeted to a final record of 8-9, literally watching their postseason dreams evaporate in real time on national television week after week. Because of that catastrophic final stretch, the Colts missed the playoffs for the 5th consecutive year. 5 straight years of packing up lockers early. 5 straight years of watching January football from the couch. The psychological weight of that late-season collapse is immense. It hangs over the facility like a dark cloud, defining every single offseason move they've made. They simply cannot afford another misstep out of the gate, which is exactly why every single medical update on their highest-paid playmaker is analyzed under a microscope by fans, analysts, and the front office alike.
But let's be very clear about the history here, because context is absolutely everything. That devastating 0-7 collapse, that was not on Alec Pierce. The true catalyst for that nightmare finish was a brutal blow to the most important position on the football field. The season was completely derailed by a major injury to quarterback Daniel Jones. You take the starting quarterback away from any team in this league, and the dominoes are inevitably going to fall. The passing game stalled out, the offense lost its rhythm, the play calling had to become totally restricted to protect the backup, and all of Pierce's heroic efforts playing on a bad ankle simply weren't enough to carry a fractured, injured roster across the finish line. So the crucial point we need to take away from this is this. We haven't even seen what this team is fully capable of when all the premium pieces are actually on the board together. In a brutally competitive AFC South where the margins for error are razor thin, a fully healthy Daniel Jones throwing to a newly minted $114 million Alec Pierce, that changes the entire geometry of the football field. It forces opposing safeties to play deep, which opens up the running game, which gives this offense a truly explosive, limitless ceiling. This duo carries massive, franchise-altering expectations for 2026. The front office fundamentally believes this exact combination, operating behind a strong offensive line, is the key to finally breaking that agonizing 5-year playoff drought and restoring championship expectations to the city of Indianapolis.
And it all comes down to this massive, looming deadline on the calendar. September 13th, Week 1 of the 2026 NFL season. The Indianapolis Colts open their highly anticipated campaign against a heavyweight contender, the Baltimore Ravens. It is the ultimate litmus test right out of the gate. A physical, grueling, violent clash that will set the tone for the entire year. You literally couldn't ask for a more demanding opening matchup. The clock is ticking down, and the entire football world will be watching closely to see if Alec Pierce trots out of that tunnel at Lucas Oil Stadium in full gear. Will the cautious, highly calculated rehab strategy execute flawlessly, allowing him to dominate from the very first snap? Will the historic $114 million investment pay off when the lights are brightest and the hits are the hardest against a ruthless Ravens defense? Or will the shadows of that stunning 2025 collapse continue to haunt this proud franchise into a brand new year? The tension is undeniable, the stakes have never been higher for this front office, and the answers, well, they are just weeks away. If you want to stay on top of every twist, turn, and major consequence in this story and all around the league, make sure you subscribe to NFL Nexus right now. Hit that like button if you appreciate this deep dive explainer. Comment your opinion down below. Did the Colts make a huge mistake paying Pierce early? And support the channel by becoming a member today. We will see you next time.